Hello, hello. This is Dallas Cohen, the Rebound Coach, and you are watching or listening to an episode of the Rebound Coach Live. I am so glad that you're here today. Are you a lady in waiting? I don't know about you, but I spent a long time with the heart cry of when will God change him? When? So I don't normally speak to this issue so much anymore, but I'll share a little bit of context with you as to why. I've had a few conversations recently that just reminded me of that place where I was, when God, when will you change him? When will this be better? And so if you find yourself in that spot, I'd like to speak to your heart today. If it is your first time sharing virtual space with me, thank you so much for sharing my corner of the internet today. If you are watching live or if you're on the replay, I would love to see your comments. Just comment and let me know that you're here. If you are listening over on Clubhouse, feel free to use the chat just to say hello. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself if this is our first time getting to meet. Again, my name is Dallas Cohen. I'm the Rebound Coach from thereboundcoach.com. And here's the headline, y'all. What led us to having this time together today? As I said, hey, Cheryl, it's so good to see you. It's so good to see you virtually. As I said before, I spent a long time asking myself, when will God change him? When will this be better? When will this be different? And it started, with my own story. For those of you who don't know me, I spent 10 years married to a man who wanted me dead. And that's not a punchline. It is a fact. And that didn't make a lot of sense for someone like me. I had a good background. I had two parents. They were married. They loved God. They loved each other. Married for a lifetime, as a matter of fact, before my mother passed away. And I saw my father be her caretaker. So I got to witness unselfish love. I got to witness a good marriage. At the same time, I was molested from the time I was 8 to the time I was 16, which is really common in the African American community. There's 2 out of every 4 women are sexually abused in some form or fashion in their childhood. And so when you're in those young years, you're forming your identity. So that radically affected how I saw myself, how I saw God in a household of faith, and how I related to men. So fast forward, when I met the man I married and eventually divorced, there were definitely red flags. There were reasons not to be together. But I believed, as a woman of faith, as a praying woman, I believed God's answer was yes. And because of that, I just thought whatever would come, God would change him. Whatever trouble would come our way, I knew this wouldn't be easy. I wasn't expecting easy. I just believed that things would eventually work itself out. There'd be a miracle. God would swoop in and change him. And whatever trouble came, we'd overcome it. We'd outlast it. Y'all, trouble came right away. There was no honeymoon period and switch up. It was right away and never quite left. We got into a cycle of what I call coping and crisis. It's where you never quite get to good. You never quite get to okay even. You're just in this place of walking on eggshells and being very careful all the time. The rules keep changing, but you're trying not to step on a landmine and make him upset. But he always seems to be upset, right? Over anything. You do your best and you find new rules, and it's all this work around trying to keep peace in your home, trying to keep peace, trying to keep the rage volcano from exploding out of him. And so I spent a lot of time doing that, in that coping dance. And then every so often there'd be this big crisis that would just blow everything up, right? So we went from this coping to crisis. And then everything's on the floor and you got to go pick it back up and try again. And we did that for the better part of 9 years. And over that, almost 10 years. And toward the end of that time, we had the biggest crisis we've ever experienced. He was a serial adulterer the whole time, but he eventually left for this other woman. And I found out him and that woman had been plotting my murder for months by the time I found out. So Like if you're watching a movie and then suddenly you hear the record scratch, like that's the moment for me. Um, Everything kind of came to a halt, and I had really important decisions to make in a really stressful time. And I spent all this time asking God, when are you going to change him? When is this going to get better? And I had to come to a reality point of this might not get better. So I had decisions to make through a divine series of events. When I tell you, like, you have to just read it to know through a divine series of events. Not only am I alive here with you, my children and I are safe, and we're continuing to heal and rebuild and deconstruct and reconstruct our ideas around God, around marriage, around faith, continuing to grow and heal and learn. And I have the sacred honor of serving high achieving women of faith as a coach, and helping them, women who've been through betrayal, through trauma, through abuse, and want to reclaim territory in their relationship with themselves. Because that's where I was. That's where I was. That's the path I'm continuing to walk, and I have the honor of walking alongside others. So I could have allowed in that trial, one of the biggest trials of my whole life, I could allow the identity that my ex-husband had planned for me to tell me who I was, what I was allowed to say, what I was allowed to wear, what I was allowed to, how I could express my faith and how I couldn't, how many days I had left on the planet. Y'all, he had a death date planned for me. He wrote it down, the whole thing. So I could allow that to tell me who I was, or I could choose life. So out of that entire season, I wrote a memoir. It's my second book. It's called I Choose Life: Rewrite Your Love Story and Change Your Legacy. And it is my story. So if you're into like murder mysteries or SVU, like if that's your jam, you're going to love this. Receipts and all, okay? But it's not just my story. It is a manual for helping you understand if you've walked through abuse, whether that's a childhood sexual abuse, if that's an abusive relationship, if that's anything. If you've walked through abuse, this is a book for you. Or if you love someone who has walked through abuse or is currently in an abusive situation, this is the book for you. You can find this at thereboundcoach.com/book. That is thereboundcoach.com/book. You can order one of these physical copies and I will sign it, write you a love note, and send it in the mail. Or you can get a copy from Amazon. They will send it to you, or an ebook from there as well. You can find all of those links and information at thereboundcoach.com/book. Okay, so today, like I had mentioned, I spend my time now coaching women, teaching women, having events and such that just speak life and pour life into women. And I serve women who have been through betrayal, trauma, and abuse. And we talk a lot about, your heart and healing and growth. And I don't often speak to that place that I was, that miserable, stuck place of God, when, I'm doing my part. I'm being a good wife, as good as I could be. Okay. There was definitely faults, but doing the best I could, and praying and waiting and praying and waiting and praying and waiting. And I was very committed to my marriage. I was committed to God, really. I was committed to God. I am committed to God. And I believed that in order to be committed to God in a marriage, you must be committed to the marriage. And so that's where my heart was. And I know I had a couple conversations recently with people who are in the place that I was. And not every situation is an abusive situation. So not every husband is abusive. Sometimes there are differences, just differences. Everybody's got their stuff, right? Everybody's went through something in childhood. Everyone is either healing or not healing from whatever happened in childhood. And when we're married, your wounds affect your spouse and their wounds affect you. Now, that's not always an abusive situation, but even if it's not, especially if it's not, because some people feel like they have, I mean, you could have an out, so to speak, a conscious free exit of a marriage that is abusive. Now, that's, some people not so conscious free, but even if you take that out of the equation and it's not an abusive situation, so you may not feel like you have an exit, but you do feel the pain of that other person's wounds, that other person's misunderstandings, that other person's hangups, whatever they are. It is the human condition. It's the human condition. We are interdependent, which means we need each other. We need each other. We are designed for that type of intimate fellowship. We are designed for that. That's why marriage is such a desirable thing for humankind, because we're designed for that kind of relationship. So even though that's our design, even though there's great benefit, even though companionship is a need like oxygen, on the other side of that, companionship costs. Intimacy costs. Intimacy on a sustained level like marriage, it is costly, even if it's not abusive. So what do you do when you're in that place? God, please change him, make this better. I spent a lot of time in prayer. I spent a lot of time depressed. I spent a lot of time hopeless. I spent a lot of time longing and hoping that things would change. And so many wives are in that stuck place. They're in that stuck place, waiting and wanting him to change. And the question I ask myself and the question I pose to you, if you identify with this, is why? Why do you want this person to change so much? Now, I had to be honest. There were, like I said, I tell you the truth. I have faults too. I had faults in my marriage. And part of that was there was definitely a power struggle going on all the time. And there was a self-righteousness between both of us. For my end of it, he didn't work. He did not work. He did not work. Employment or otherwise, he did not work. So I had a lot of resentment toward him because he didn't bring in any money and I had to do all of the everything. And held a lot of resentment. Now, whether or not I was right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Whether or not that was his job to provide, that's not the point. The point is, I would hold myself in higher regard than him for a lot of reasons, but that was one of them. Because, I was holding down the jobs and I was taking care of everything and I was planning, I was cleaning, I was doing all the stuff, and he was doing nothing, right? So I had this narrative going in my head all the time. And that was one of the big things I used to pray would change, help him. And I went back and forth on whether, how much hope I had in that situation. But, I would pray for him to get a job, him to want to get a job, him to keep the job. He would get them every now and again and lose them in a week, So I'd pray for him to keep something, all the things. And so there was a lot of like, oh, I really want this to change. And I say in my mind, I wanted it to change because it would make him more confident. It would help him be the husband he was supposed to be. It would do this or do that or the other, things for his benefit. But if I was honest, it was for my benefit. It was so I could feel like somebody was providing for me. It was so someone would lighten the load off of me. It was so I didn't have to be ashamed that I had a husband that wasn't working. Okay. Now, not everybody's ashamed of that, but I was in the circle that I lived in and worked in and churched in. I was ashamed of that. And I had to be honest that the prayers I was praying and the change I wanted in him so desperately were more for me than for him. It was more because I wanted an easier life. I wanted a better life. Now, again, not about whether or not this is right or wrong. Okay. So it is not a bad thing to want your husband to be employed, right? That's not a bad desire. But in my situation, I didn't want it for his benefit. I wanted it for mine. So in other kind of prayers, wanting him to change in any way to make my life better. I Like I said, I went back and forth on hope. I didn't always hope that he would gain employment or keep employment. I didn't always hope that he would. I definitely didn't hope that he would end adultery. I knew that he was not ready to end adultery. Even, through the end of it, I knew he wasn't. I would call him on it. We would argue about it, but I knew in my heart of hearts he just wasn't. He didn't want to stop. He didn't plan to stop. He didn't want to stop. So I didn't pray prayers against his will in that way. And I didn't have a lot of strength to pray about that. But I prayed about other changes. And so, questions for my ladies in waiting. Okay. So I was a part of the circles, the Christian marriage circles that, were fiercely dedicated to covenant, because that's where I was. And they never pose anything like any options other than pray, wait, pray some more, wait some more, build your faith, pray, wait, right? So I was definitely in that. But I was a lady in waiting. I was waiting for him to change. I was waiting for things to get better. And, religiously, of course, we had differences as well. And so I bring that up because that's an example that's not necessarily an abusive situation. Not necessarily abusive if your husband doesn't work. Not necessarily abusive or, divorce clause, biblical divorce clause, if he's a different faith, right? The unequally yoked clause we really only use if they're not willing to be peaceable with you. There are many spouses that live peaceably with their spouses of a different faith. So not necessarily an abusive thing, but it can be something that weighs your heart down. So I want to ask a few thought-provoking questions for my ladies in waiting. Number one, why is it really that you want him to change? So we talked about this just a minute ago. Is it really about his benefit or is it about yours? And if you're not sure, here's some questions that can help. If it didn't affect you, would you still want that change? So if it didn't affect you, so let's say for the job example, even for the faith example, either one. For the faith example, let's say you have one faith and he has another, and he is laughing at you because of your faith, and he's mocking you, and he's trying to stop you, and you're just causing a ruckus and a pain in the butt. Okay, so that would be like, oh, God, change him so that he can stop being a pain in the butt, right? But what if he's not? What if he's not? Like, he's not bothering you. You can express your faith however you want to. He's giving you just flexibility and freedom and respect. I respect you. You do what you do. Let me do what I do over here, right? So if it's not hurting you, do you still want this change? Okay. Is it really about him getting better, having a better life, or is it about you having a better life, right? Or how you perceive it? If you knew, and here's question number 3. So question number 1, why is it that you really want that change? Question number 2, if it did not affect you, would you still want the change to happen? Question number 3 for consideration, if you knew for sure that he would not change, if you knew for sure that he would not change, that he would never change, okay? What will your choices be? What are your choices in that situation? It's a heavy thought. It's a heavy thought. And so a lot of us who have been in abusive marriages live on what they call hopium, right? It's just as addictive as opium. It's I hope. I'm hoping against hope that he would change. And if I just hold out, he will change. If I just do this one thing, he will change. If I just please him, he will change. If I just whatever, right? So we keep that line open, because what's the alternative? What if he never changes? I had a moment like that in the middle of my crisis. I was at a domestic violence advocacy center, so a place where women can get services for domestic violence. And it was in the middle of just the whole storm that was happening in my life. And one of the professionals that I just shared my story with said to me, "I think you know in your heart he's not going to change." And in that moment, I did not. And I looked at her and I said, "No." I said, "I don't believe in divorce. And God can do anything." And no, right? So she had seen my story in a million women. She had seen what the telltale signs are and what they look like, and she knew where it was going, and I didn't know where it was going in that time. And that, number one, is the benefit of having other people around to hear you, to know what's going on with you, and to see past it. That's also the benefit of having professionals. She was a professional advocate, so she knew the story inwards and out. Okay. But I clearly was blinded by hopium, and just thinking if I just stuck to whatever principles I thought was the right principles, that things would change. And God, ladies, here's what we know. We know that we cannot change people. Like, we know that, right? As adults, we know that we cannot change any other person, no matter how hard we try or what the things that we employ. I wish, right? But we can't. We can't change people. God has the ability to change people, right? He has the ability, but not the authority. We have authority over ourselves. Now, we can give God permission to do this or to do that, but he's not going to override anyone's will. So just like I shared with you earlier, I knew that my ex-husband was not ready to stop cheating. I knew that from his behavior, from his words, like, so clear. So I couldn't make that stop, but I had to tell myself the truth, and I had to make a decision based on the truth. The truth was, he wasn't ready. He was not going to stop. It had been 10 years and he was not going to stop committing adultery. So now what? What are my choices? As scary as that is, it is also incredibly empowering. Incredibly empowering. Because you can do lots. I won't say you can do lots of things because the choices are not many. But you have power. And the power isn't waiting on God, and the power isn't waiting on him. The power is in you. It doesn't always mean leave. It doesn't always mean that. It doesn't always mean that. Like I said, I was in an abusive situation for almost 10 years. It took my very life being in danger before I was ready to make any actions. And even after that, some more time before any legal stuff happened. So I'm not rushing you if you find yourself in a situation like mine. I'm not rushing you. I'm not judging you. I'm not any of those things. But telling yourself the truth gives you power. So, are you safe? That would be my question after. If he never changes, what are your choices? What will your choices be? And are you safe? That's a very important distinction. Because if you are safe, and I don't just mean safe physically, are you safe emotionally? Are you safe spiritually? Are you safe? If you're safe and you're just disgruntled because of a character flaw in your spouse, I'd say par for the course, right? Not that there's no relief in sight, but there are ways to manage a situation that is safe. Okay. There are ways to manage a situation that is not abusive, but is difficult. That's not abusive, but it hurts your heart. We know that when you're married, that covenant is an intimate covenant. So someone's personality challenges, somebody's heart wounds and issues, somebody's upbringing, all of that affects you and will affect you because that's the nature of an intimate relationship. But there are ways to handle that outside of leaving. Okay. So asking yourself if you're safe is very important. I want to share just a couple of strategies for those stuck in place, for the ladies in waiting. If you find yourself there, I'm committed to God, I'm committed to my marriage, I believe that my husband is the right person for me, I am not being abused. However, I am waiting for God to change him so that I can, whatever, fill in the blank. Okay. If you find yourself stuck in the stuck place, the goal is to get to a place where you can pray, continue to pray. You can want his change for him and not for you. That's the goal. That's where you're hoping to get to one day, where it's not about you. It's not about, well, I want him to stop doing XYZ, right? Because that hurts me. But you want him to be whole and free, whatever that looks like, right? And I can tell you it took a long time. Okay, we're at like 3 years, about 3 years post my crisis. It took me a long time to get to the place where I could pray for his healing, not for my benefit, for his benefit. And what I would even say, for the sake of God's name, for the sake of God's name, is why I at this time in my life still every now and then pray for my ex-husband's healing, for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of God's name. I pray that he is reconciled to his heavenly Father in a real way. And it's truly where I came to. But it took a long time to get there. And it's not about, well, I want him to suffer because he made me suffer. Like, that's a whole different call for a whole different day. Won't go down that path. But I will tell you that's a goal to get to for your heart. Okay, for your heart, not his, but yours. I will also say, in the meantime, however long this meantime is, you can find ways to make your life better, regardless of his decision or indecision, or whether he changes or doesn't change. Another person's life, now, even as close a relationship as marriage is, even in marriage, we do not have to allow our spouses and whatever their choices are dictate our life. Even if we're remaining married, we do not have to have their choices, their life, their issues make our lives bad or good. We have power. We have power over our choices. We have power over our perspective. We have power over our mentality. You have power. And you can make your life better. Find ways, new ways to make your life better, regardless of someone else's choices. Okay? So I would encourage you to do that. And again, if you are safe. That is priority number one. Are you safe? Because if you're not safe, we need to look at our choices. If he does not change, what are your choices? What are your choices? So for those, and here's what I'll say too. So for those of you who may be divorced and remarried, and there is quite a debate in Christendom on what is an acceptable reason to divorce and what is not. I will tell you that I used to be of the camp that there was no acceptable reason for divorce. Even adultery, even abuse was not a biblical reason for divorce. That's what I used to believe, and that's what I used to teach. And there are many, 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 many that are still believing and teaching those things. While this is not a theological kind of conversation today, I will say, if for whatever reason you find yourself divorced, I want you to know there's no judgment here. There's no judgment here. There's no condemnation here. You don't have to receive that. Okay? don't try to heal by yourself. One of the first things I found in my healing journey was that there were a lot of women just like me. There were a lot of women who loved God fiercely, were dedicated to God fiercely, and because of that, were dedicated to their marriages. And it was just as much a question of why, God, why? And who is this God who ordained this experience for me? And who is this God who says this and this and this about marriage in the Bible, right? It's not an easy walk. None of this is easy. If you're in a disappointing or discouraging or painful marriage that's not abusive, it's not easy. If you're in an abusive situation, you're trying to figure out what to do, that's not easy. If you're already divorced and you're trying to heal and move on with your life and get back to you, that's not easy. None of this is easy. None of it. What I will say is you don't have to heal by yourself. You don't have to figure this out by yourself. There are guides, there are women to come alongside you and love you and not judge you and give you space to say anything you need to say, as loud or as quietly as you need to say it, with no judgment. And I was blessed to have those people in my life, and I am blessed to be those people in other people's lives, be that person. And so I want to share a video with you in just a minute. We have the honor of hosting a VIP retreat called Sanctuary Experience. And it's a 3-day VIP retreat for women where you get to do all those things I just named, where you get to be honest, where you get to be you. You don't have to be like the responsible you. You don't have to be the church face you. You don't have to hold it together. You can just be free and be yourself and receive healing and peace. And so I want to share Sharente's testimony with you about her sanctuary experience, and I will be right back.
I will say for me, wearing so many different hats all the time, I realized that I was running, and it wasn't really from myself or from others. It was striving at something because of things from my childhood that I didn't know I was still holding on to and not letting God and picking them back up. So I will say Sanctuary has allowed me the space and afforded me the space to be able to, one, be myself and to let it go, to cry it out, and be in a place, in a space where there's safety and there's not any judgment or shame or guilt. And I would recommend anyone to join the Sanctuary Experience if you're a woman in leadership, because for me, I finally got to take that hat off and just be me. And you don't get that everywhere, and you don't get that in a place where you will actually feel relaxed and renewed, which I feel right now.
I like that at the end. If you would like to have the same experience as Sharente, getting back to you, taking that responsibility hat off and just being yourself for a few glorious days at the beach, join us. You can get more information at thereboundcoach.com/sanctuary. The Sanctuary Experience is coming up September 8th, 9th, and 10th. So this is the time. Book your tickets. Get your tickets to Sanctuary. Book your plane tickets. Get your hotel. As a matter of fact, we have a special situation going on right now where your accommodations are very low cost. Wink, wink. So any questions, you want to find more information, go to thereboundcoach.com/sanctuary. I will say I saw Yusufine, I saw your comment there, and I do want to talk about it because I feel like it's important. This is important. So she says, God wants us happy and will not want us being abused. He didn't send us that man. We went and got them ourselves. So that is a very popular opinion. I don't necessarily agree with that opinion. Now, I think that our own issues and lack thereof definitely influence our decision to get with a mate, for sure. Also, there are praying women. Like, I'm a praying woman. I got confirmation after confirmation after confirmation to marry the man I married. So I know that people don't believe me when I say that because it was abusive. And why would God want you abused? To me, it's not any different than a child that has abusive parents. Okay. Did God want that child abused? No, but he surely put that child with those parents knowing what their choices would be. Right. The same with, a sick child or family member, or any other situation that causes pain. Does God want us to be in pain? I don't think he wants that. Do I think he ordains it? I do. That's my personal opinion based on my experience and the experience of others. Um, I think there's things to learn and grow through. And I think we all have a hand in it, including God. So I did want to speak to that just because there's so many of us that are really confused. Like, God, I prayed. God, I got all these confirmations. God, why? Um, and that's just as valid. So I don't carte blanche say, well, if something went badly, God must not have been in it. I think he's in all of it. So anyway, I just wanted to raise that up in case you're watching on the replay and you have the same questions I did. I just wanted to say that. So I appreciate everyone coming to be a part of this with me. I welcome you all to Sanctuary Experience coming up so soon. Go to thereboundcoach.com/sanctuary to find out more, or you can hit me up. You can message me. You can put in the chat, hey, I want to know more about this. I can't wait to see you, Cheryl. I'm calling your name out. Can't wait to see you coming up so soon. All right. Thank you, everyone. God bless you. If you are struggling, if your heart is hurting, if you're waiting for someone to change, my inbox is open. I would love to pray with you. I would love to support you in any way that I could. You do not have to do this alone. All right. Thanks so much again, ladies and gents. And until next time, choose life.